The year is 1956. Imagine you're 9-year-old and a friend tells you that you can't come to his beach house because, well, you're one of the poor kids. Ouch. That one cutting remark, that painful moment, is what kicks this whole thing off and sparks a truly life changing question. So, feeling pretty hurt and definitely confused, young Robert Kiyosaki goes home to his dad, the man he would later call his poor dad, and he asks him a question that would completely change the course of his entire life. And there it is. Dad, can you tell me how to get rich? Simple enough, right? But this father, this highly educated school superintendent, he didn't really have an answer. All he said was, use your head, son. And that was not an answer. Well, it immediately highlights this huge difference in how two main father figures in his life saw the world of money. And this right here is the core conflict of the whole book. It's fascinating. On one side, you have got his poor dad, super educated, PhD and all that, telling him to learn for money, and then on the other hand, there's this rich dad who, get this, was an 8th grade dropout, and his advice was completely opposite. Learn to have money work for you. That fundamental class in philosophy sets the entire incredible story in motion. So Robert and his friend Mike, they decided to go and approach Mike's father, the man who would become Robert's rich dad, and he actually agrees. He says he'll teach them how to get rich. But his offer was definitely not what they were expecting. Not at all. The term was super simple. You work for me, I'll teach you. You don't, I won't. See, this wasn't going to be some classroom lecture. The lessons weren't going to be in the textbook. They were going to learn this stuff through direct hands-on experience. And it all started with a very unglamorous job. So what was the first job? Dusting canned goods in one of Rich Dad's grocery store for measly 10 cents an hour for 3 hours every single Saturday. Week after week, they did this boring, repetitive work. And you can imagine, Robert started feeling a lot less like a student and a whole lot more like a slave. Okay, so after 3 weeks of this, just dusting cans with absolutely zero teaching, Robert has had it. His frustration just boils over. He's ready to quit. And he decides he's going to confront in front of this rich dad. And this confrontation, it sets the stage for very first real lesson of his entire financial education. And this is what Rich Dad tells him. He calmly explains that the lesson had already begun. See, his point was that life doesn't teach you with words. It just pushes you around. By letting them get angry and feel exploited, he was actually giving them a taste of what it feels like to be trapped by working for a small paycheck. So to make sure they really got to the lesson, Rich Dad upped the ante big time. He told them to go back to work, same job, but this time for nothing, zero pay. The goal here was to focus their brains to completely stop thinking about paycheck and start seeing opportunities instead. And this led to the ultimate test. So check this out. For 3 more weeks, they actually did it. They worked for free. Then Rich Dad calls them back into the office and he starts to tempt them with a series of bigger and bigger pay rises. This whole thing was a test designed to see if they had actually learned the lesson or if deep down they still had a price. First up, he offered them a raise 25 cents an hour. Now I've got to remember, for a kid back in the 50s, that's a pretty nice little bump in the pay. But they remembered the point of lesson and stayed quiet. Okay, so then he really ups the game. $1 an hour. A whole dollar. You can just imagine their hearts starting to pound. This was real money now. They're thinking about all the things they could buy. New bikes, baseball gloves, you name it. But somehow they held firm. They refused. And then came the final ultimate temptation. $5 an hour. $5. This was absolutely unbelievable amount of money. I mean, more than most adults were making back then. But the offer was so insane, so over the top, that something inside them just shifted. That needy, desperate part of their brain that just wants the money, it went totally silent and they calmly refused. And you know what? Rich Dad just smiled. They had passed the test. He explains that by resisting all the temptation, they had just taken the very first step towards escaping the emotional trap that keeps most people financially stuck for their entire lives. And what did they call this trap? The rat race. It's the never-ending loop, this cycle that is powered by two of the strongest human emotions we have when it comes to money, and that's fear and greed. So here is how that cycle works. First, the fear of being without money, of not paying your bills, it drives you to work hard. Then you earn that paycheck. Then as soon as you do, greed and desire kick in. And you start thinking about all the wonderful things you can buy. So you can spend a little more on things that don't make you money. And what happens next? The cycle repeats. You're trapped, always chasing the next paycheck. So now that he has revealed the trap, Rich Dad gives them one last piece of advice before sending them back to work, still for free by the way. He basically says, keep using your brain, keep your eyes open. Now that you have not just focused on the wage, you will start to see opportunities everywhere. And pretty soon they saw an opportunity. They noticed that the store manager had this routine. She would rip the front cover off the old comic books that didn't sell, send the cover back to the distributor for credits, and just throw the rest of the comic book away. And for them, a massive light bulb went on. So they got permission to take all these discarded comics, which meant their product cost was zero, and with them, they started their very first business, a comic book library in Mike's basement. They charged other kids 10 cents for admission, and they could read as many comics they wanted for 2 hours. I mean, what a deal, right? A whole comic costs 10 cents back then. And the key insight, the really crucial part, was that they were making money. About $9.5 a week without even being there. See, that wasn't a paycheck. That was income from an asset. Their money was finally working for them. And just like that, they got it. They truly understood the lesson. Not from a book, not from a lecture, but through their own hands-on experience. They had learned the first most fundamental rule of wealth on a deep cut level. You see, this story isn't really about the comic books. It's a powerful lesson in shifting your entire perspective from that of an employee to that of an owner. And that really leaves up with a big question to think about. What opportunities are you maybe failing to see right now just because you are so focused on the next paycheck? What might be hiding right there in the plain sight?